Welcome. This training is about restoring control and certainty in your marriage in just 90 minutes, without therapy, without exposure, and without involving your spouse. It's the same system I've used to help 467 plus founders and executives across 13 countries regain command at home using spouse intel. But before we begin, I want you to answer this privately for me. Do you love your wife, but hate that peace at home is something that you have to work for, like something that you have to negotiate daily? Do you want the same quiet control at home that you have at work? I'm talking about influence without arguments, clarity without drama. And tell me, do you want to have predictive power, like the ability to read your spouse like a financial forecast? If your answer to any of the above questions is yes, then this briefing is for you. And I'm here today talking about all this is because for the last 6 years, I've helped elite men install sovereignty in their marriage without therapy, without exposure, and without involving their spouse. And today, in this training, I'll show you how I do that using spouse intel. But before we dive into that, let's talk about the invisible war that you're a part of. I'm talking about your current operating reality. So the reality is that you command teams, you manage complex portfolios, you navigate high-stakes negotiations daily, right? Yet at home, you operate without intelligence. You have no idea what your wife is thinking or planning or doing. You have no short way to figure out how she processes emotions, what season of life she's in, and what's coming ahead for her. In business, before you launch a new product or a service, what do? You gather market intel, right? You study consumer desires, their fears, their routines, their patterns. But at home, you were never taught to use the same principles. Why? You see, this operational gap of having market intel when you do anything related to your business versus not having any spouse intel when you do something related to your home, when you do something related to your wife. This operational gap is the real reason you're successful at work and you're struggling at home. Not having intel on your wife puts you at a strategic disadvantage. At work, you lead. You call the shots. You stay in control. But at home, you're at her mercy. Why? Because you're reacting to her emotional signals. And one thing to know about women is that women are masters at emotional control. Emotion is what she's been trained to pay attention to since birth. Okay? So if she chooses to manipulate you through emotional signals, you have no advantage whatsoever as of now. But all of this changes when you understand that fights at home are not random. There is an underlying architecture to it. But because you don't have access to this architecture, every decision that you make right now becomes a gamble. Every conversation carries this unpredictable risk. And the cost of this intelligence gap is hence massive. Okay? It erodes your authority, it weakens your position, and over time, this weakened power, it bleeds into your work, it bleeds into your security, it bleeds into your focus. So what you really want is a short way to end conflicts. But I won't promise you that. Okay, because that's not possible. Instead, what I can promise you is this, that I can make every conflict predictable for you. I can spell out her exact patterns, her exact triggers, and resolution pathways. Think of it as having a complete market research dossier on your wife. Because when you have access to this intel, you can strategically plan your life with her. This intel works with surgical accuracy because it's based on her emotional architectural map. And if you have access to this map, it becomes your transition from a chaotic marriage where you're being blindsided every single day to a calm and sovereign marriage where you have the control. Now, let's talk about the sovereignty blueprint. Meaning, how do I install this sovereignty, this control into your marriage. Now, you see, most men approach marriage problems at the surface level, meaning they address arguments, they address the tone, they address specific behaviors of their wives, right? But what they're really doing is they're reacting to results. Okay? Results come from actions, actions come from thoughts, thoughts come from feelings, and feelings come from beliefs. This is something that we all know, right? But there's one more layer that nobody knows about. And that layer is that beneath all of this, beneath the beliefs layer, lies another layer. And this layer is what I call the core script. It is basically her emotional architecture. Her beliefs aren't random. There's an architecture beneath that gives birth to those beliefs. And once she has a belief in place, then everything else follows, just like this diagram. So the point is that her core script, her emotional architecture, is the foundational operating system. It is a system which cannot be faked, it cannot be negotiated with, and it for sure cannot be overridden through sheer willpower. So when men try to fix their marriages with surface level fixes, they always fail because they're not addressing the architecture. Surface level can change at any point. Today she's mad at food, tomorrow she'll be mad at clothes, later she'll be mad at your friend, then she'll be mad at your business hours. Like, the point is that she's mad. Okay? How that anger comes to the surface will always keep changing. And as long as you keep trying to fix the surface, you will keep losing. Because surface is not the origin of her anger. Her anger is coming because of a certain thing that's happening inside her core script, because of a certain thing that's happening inside her emotional architecture. So the predictive power that I mentioned a few minutes ago comes from mapping this architecture of hers, not from reacting to the surface level behavior that it produces. When you understand her emotional architecture, you anticipate outcomes. You design interventions that work with her system, not against it. And so, the blueprint, the emotional architecture, the spouse intel method of installing clarity and control in your marriage is not about changing her at all. It's about understanding the architecture that she's operating on and playing into that architecture. Okay? Because once you see that architecture, then your role shifts. You're no longer firefighting the systems. Instead, you're installing control at the source. You know why she's mad. You know what she's thinking, what she's feeling, what she deeply believes in this moment. You know where all of that is coming from. And when you have control at the source, you will have control over her. You will have control over your married life, and it'll become very predictable. Her behavior will not be random. The fights will not be random. You'll be able to map that very accurately. Now, think of it as a car factory assembly line. Okay? There's a sequence that the car factory follows. Okay? First, there'll be welding, then paint, then assembly. No matter the car, this sequence stays the same. It's a universal sequence, right? Similarly, your wife has a sequence built into her emotional architecture. It is different for different people. So the sequence that your wife follows is not the same sequence that your brother's wife will follow or your friend's wife will follow. It is very custom and it depends from person to person. It changes drastically. Okay? But once you see the sequence of your wife, what happens is that you stop asking, what should I say? And instead you start asking, what is the system telling me? What is the next step in her sequence? Because the sequence is not going to change. If she's at welding stage, then you know that the next stage is the paint stage. If she's at the paint stage, then you know the next step is the assembly. The sequence stays the same. It does not change. And this is where the predictive power comes from. Because you already know her sequence, then all you have to do is look at what she's doing right now. You just observe what she's doing right now, and just by observing and having this knowledge of her sequence, you will know what she's about to do next. So essentially, what happens by gaining intel on her architecture is that you stop reacting to her emotional outbursts and start analyzing her architectural triggers. This is a huge operational difference. The difference between people who use spouse intel and people who do not use spouse intel. People who know that she operates on an emotional architecture and they have access to that architecture of hers versus someone who has no access, no knowledge of the system at all. This is the difference between struggling with chaos in your marriage versus commanding a predictable environment in your marriage. Now, let me show you what this looks like in practice. You see, I don't know you yet, but I can tell that your wife runs on conflict cycles. And after mapping 467 plus conflict cycles for my clients and helping them install sovereignty in their marriage, what I've come to realize is that women who are married to elite men run 3 core patterns. Okay, so your wife is probably running one of these 3 core patterns. So let me show you what those patterns are. Pattern number 1 is that she withdraws when she feels powerless. She becomes cold when she feels replaced by her work, and she becomes very sharp, very, very sharp with her words and her actions when she feels unheard. Okay, the moment you make her feel chosen, she becomes warm. That very moment. This is pattern number 1. Okay. Pattern number 2 is that she escalates to test your frame. She'll escalate conflicts, she'll escalate fights, she'll escalate minor inconveniences, and she's doing that to push your boundaries to see if you'll really hold. She creates drama to confirm that you're still there in the relationship. She wants a reaction from you. And when you demonstrate calm authority, she softens. That very moment she softens. Okay, this is pattern number 2. Now, pattern number 3 is that she cycles between independence and dependence. She pulls away when she feels smothered, and she clings when she feels abandoned. So either she's pulling away or she is clinging to you. When she clings and you smother her, she pulls away again. But when you let her pull away, then she feels abandoned. Okay? And when that happens, the moment you give her clear boundaries, the moment you define clear boundaries and make autonomy predictable for her, that's when she stabilizes. So your wife is running one of these 3 core patterns, and I'll show you which one your particular wife is running in the audit if you choose to work with me. But the reason I'm showing you all of this is because once you know her pattern, nothing she does is confusing anymore. Once you know her pattern, then you can work towards finding a solution to that pattern, finding a permanent solution, making your marriage predictable. Without knowing the pattern, there's no way out. You have to first identify the pattern. And so, when you do that, what happens is every reaction becomes predictable, every conflict becomes navigable, and every emotional shift becomes readable, right? This is not guesswork. This is architectural intelligence. And when you have it, you stop operating blind, okay? So for most men at your level, the real fear isn't conflict. In my experience, the real fear for most men at your level is being blindsided in your own marriage. So let me now show you how predictable your marriage can become once you have this architecture in place. So there was this client who came to me when he was going through a problem with his spouse, and the problem was that his wife wanted a second vacation property. Okay, he said that he knew that that move was a bad move, that they're not in the right place to get the property, get a second vacation property. But he said he is so afraid of her because the last time he said no to her, it blew up into a very long Cold War. He said that Cold War went on for weeks. And at that time, this client was at a point where he could not afford having marital problems. So when he explained why he couldn't buy a second vacation property, to me, he sounded perfectly logical. Okay, his logic was perfectly sound, but what he was missing was that her demand had emotional drivers, and those emotional drivers were invisible to him. Okay, and that is the reason the previous attempt to say no resulted in weeks of tension for him at home. What spouse intel did for him was that I identified the key architectural component in this entire situation from the lens of his wife. And when I did that, I found out that she's really looking for legacy framing. Like, legacy framing is the key architectural component that is driving her need to buy, that is driving her need to get a second vacation property. So I told him that her financial openness was not about the money itself. It was tied to seeing proof of long-term stability for her and for her kids. I shared with him that her architecture required a specific type of security demonstration before she could feel safe releasing a major financial commitment. And so the precision move was not to block the purchase, it was to present the stability proof through status aligned alternatives. So, what he did was he shifted the conversation from a hard no to here's a better path to the security that you actually want. And what happened was, because her architecture was satisfied, the conflict didn't happen. The conflict was avoided. And so the outcome of the spouse intel for him was a voluntary course correction without a single argument. She dropped the second property idea completely and became excited about an alternative investment that aligned with his strategic priorities. So he fulfilled her architectural demand while aligning it with his strategic priorities. And so the critical principle here is that understanding the architecture allows you to lead the decision, not block it. You're not opposing her desires. Instead, you're fulfilling them through a more strategic channel. This is the application of spouse intel. This is the application of architectural intelligence. You're working with the system, not against it. This is command without confrontation. Now, there was another client who came to me with another kind of a problem. The problem was that the client said that she completely blindsided him into a "I think we need space" conversation. He said there was no warning, there was no build up. He was completely on the back foot when she said that. When he told me that and I constructed her emotional architecture, what we found was that the "we need space" talk, the "we need space" surprise was a strategic disorientation. And so the solution here was not to debate the request. When we ran the spouse intel on her, her architecture revealed that the threat was not personal. Okay, it was a loyalty trigger that was completely unrelated to him. It was a reaction to the external family pressure that she had not disclosed. So the intelligence provided immediate clarity that this was not about his marriage, but about her internal conflict. Right? So at this point, the protocol was frame holding containment. I coached him to respond without reactivity, to acknowledge the statement without endorsing the premise. And when he did that, this strategy neutralized her emotional charge. By the end of the third day, his wife was the one who was suggesting a weekend getaway. So the space talk that she brought up had completely vanished. Why? Because the architectural trigger had been addressed. And so previously, before he came to me, he took that very personally. He thought that there's something in his marriage that he has done wrong because of which he wants space. But in fact, the reality was that it wasn't about him at all. It was about an external family conflict that happened. And so the principle here is that architecture turns panic into predictable response patterns. You stop reacting to the surface statement and you start addressing the systemic cause. Let's talk about another case. There was a client who came to me and he said that it's been 3 months and there has been no intimacy between me and my spouse whatsoever. Now, this client is a big star, and he said, now I've got a 6-city media tour, and he said, I don't want to leave my home with this tension hanging in the air. So when he came to me with this problem, the backstory was that 4 months prior to this, there was complete coldness. Okay. And so he had made multiple attempts to reconnect with his wife, but every time he tried to connect with her, it just triggered her defensiveness. All right. So the problem wasn't that he didn't desire it or that he wasn't putting more effort into it. The problem was architectural misalignment. So we ran the spouse audit, and what we found out was that his wife was going through a seasonal shift pattern. You see, her emotional availability operated on a cycle independent of his initiatives. So when I got this intel from her architectural design, I knew that we have to use this to trigger the right response in her, right? So I combined this with her specific emotional currency, all right? Every single person has a different emotional currency. Emotional currency is something, it's like basically how she receives connection plus her emotional architecture. When you combine these two things, all right, this defined the exact timing and method for re-engagement with her, all right? So with this particular client, it wasn't about trying harder. It was about trying at the right time with precision. So execution of strategy with this client involved micro moments calibrated to her operating system, right? Small architectural correct actions that rebuild connection without the pressure of a formal talk or negotiation, right? And so the outcome was that their intimacy was restored within a week. Intimacy in this case returned as a natural output of the system being properly engaged. All right. So the principle that we followed is very fundamental, that intimacy is an architectural output, not a negotiation. You cannot force it. You have to understand what triggers intimacy in your spouse. All right. And once you have a map, you'll have complete code of what exactly triggers her intimacy protocol. And so what I do is every month I give a complete architectural map of your spouse. It is delivered to you privately, and in that there's a calendar in there, and there are core scripts there. Core scripts tell you what she's going to be doing, what she's going to be feeling, what is the state of mind that she's going to be operating in day to day, on weekly basis. Plus, there's a harmony calendar inside that monthly briefing. Inside her harmony calendar, I mark down every day with what she is thinking, what she's feeling, what's happening in her mind, what her desires are, what her fears are, because humans evolve and every month we change. We want something else. Like what I wanted last month is not the same thing that I want this month. Similarly, your wife is also changing every single day, every single month. So you have to know, what is she experiencing right now? If you want to install sovereignty, if you want to install control in your marriage, then you must know what is she suffering from right now. What is she desiring in this moment? And so the monthly briefing that you get comes with the core scripts that show you what she wants, what she desires, what is she fearing, what is she trying to stay away from. And then there's a harmony calendar. Now, harmony calendar marks the days of the week, days of the month, when she'll be in a good mood, when she'll be in a bad mood, when to initiate romance, when to back out, when to plan your trips away from her. Because the truth is, she's going to have bad days and she's going to have good days. And the point of having spouse intel is to know which days or which weeks are going to be bad and which days and which weeks are going to be good. If you want to have a good relationship with her, then we optimize you being around her during the time that she's having a good week. So she starts associating you with the good things. All right. If you just go randomly without having access to this intel, then you may accidentally stay around her when she's in a bad mood or when everything in her life is going wrong. And so what happens is subconsciously, she starts associating you with bad things, even though you may not have anything to do with that. All right. So Harmony Calendar is an absolute beast when it comes to installing control and sovereignty because it shows you exactly what she's going through, exactly what she's feeling, and it is all color coded. All right. If it is green, then you should stay around her during this time. If it's yellow, it means it's like neutral. If it's red, it means that you should definitely stay away from her. Or if you stay around her during the red days or the red weeks, then you better understand that she's not going to be in a good mood. And so you have to deploy tactics that keep you safe, that keep your peace safe. So this is what you get in a monthly briefing. And this monthly briefing is what this client used to restore intimacy. So now let me show you how I install sovereignty into a marriage in 90 minutes without therapy, without drama, and without involving your spouse. All right? Now, everything that I do rests on one simple idea, that when a system becomes predictable, it becomes controllable. When it's unpredictable, it becomes exhausting. Most men, when they come to me, live in the second category. They're exhausted because everything is unpredictable in the marriage. But spouse intel moves them into the first, making things predictable through a system. All right? So the sovereign marriage model has 3 layers when we begin. All right? The first layer is philosophy, second is principles, and third layer is the plan, the strategy. Okay? When these 3 align, the philosophy, the principles, and the plan, your marriage becomes predictable. When they misalign, chaos takes over. Now, let's talk about philosophy first. You see, philosophy is the first layer because it sets your direction of travel. Most men enter marriage reactively. They respond to moods, reactions, or whatever the life throws at them. So my job in the first 30 minutes of the briefing with you is that I extract your definition of marriage. Some people think of marriage as central to their life. Some people think of marriage as partnership. Some people think of marriage as an asset. All right? Some people think of marriage as something that supports their mission. So what I do in the first 30 minutes of your briefing is that I extract your exact definition of marriage. Because once I have your philosophy, then I know the path that your marriage must take. This philosophy becomes your compass, and everything that we do together gets built around this, your philosophy of marriage. So after we define your philosophy, we move to the principal stage of a sovereign marriage, right? And in this principal stage, we're not defining her behavior. We're not trying to understand her words. What we're trying to do is we're trying to understand the architecture under both her behavior and her words. All right. And this is when I map her emotional operating system. All right. I map out her core scripts that control how she thinks, how she feels, how she processes, how she responds in intimacy, in conflict, in everyday life. All right. And so far in life, you've been reacting to her surface level results. Right. And so now with Spouse Intel, it hands you the map underneath the surface results that you see from her. All right. And so once I decode her operating system, I translate into something that you can actually use every single day. And that is what I call the core grid. Now, this core grid, it really answers 3 questions. And those 3 questions are how she thinks, how she feels, and how she processes. And I map these answers of how she thinks, feels, and processes across 3 core areas of your life. The first core area is intimacy, then is husband, that is you, and then is her life. The moment this grid appears on screen, men always say the same thing. I've done this more than 500 times, and this is the exact response I've gotten every single time. What men say is, this explains everything she does. Because it does. Okay? Now, once you have your core grid, then we move on to the third section of your 90-minute protocol, the strategy. So what happens at this stage is that after I map her operating system and her patterns, what I do is I subtract what she's already getting from life minus from what she truly wants. All right? And so the leftover becomes your strategic hand. This is usually a 2 or 3 pointer list that becomes your leverage points. These 3 points that I give you in this leverage list is going to move your entire marriage. Okay? This is why you don't need effort. You don't need emotional labor. You don't need to talk it out. You don't need constant reassurance. All that you need is precision, because when you execute on this list of leverage points, you will see that very small effort from your side gets you asymmetrical results from her side. And so most men operate in a very chaotic, in a very guesswork kind of marriage where they're stepping onto emotional landmines because they're reacting, and all of this is causing a lot of stress within them. Most men operate like this, right? But when you have spouse intel, it installs sovereignty. And so you move from the left side to the right side, where you have systems that give you clarity. And because you have clarity, your marriage is predictable. And because you have that leverage list that I told you about in the strategy, in the planning part, in the last 30 minutes of the spouse intel 90-minute protocol, because of that leverage list, you can control the emotional peace inside your home. And this is how you install control in your marriage. So all you have to do is just follow that list of 3 things or 2 things or 4 things that I give to you monthly. And along with the Harmony calendar and her core scripts, you have absolutely everything that you need to move from the left side, where your marriage is very chaotic, where chaos reigns, to moving to the right side, where everything is systemized, everything is organized, and you've successfully installed peace and control and sovereignty in your marriage. Okay? This is the reason that I say that I do not need your spouse to be in the room for this to work, unlike therapy, right? This is the reason sovereignty only takes me 90 minutes to install in your marriage, right? Not more than 90 minutes. And this 90 minutes is divided into 2 calls. The first call will be of 30 minutes, where I extract your meaning of marriage after speaking to you. And then second call will be of 60 minutes. The first 30 minutes, I will explain the core scripts and the core grid of your spouse. Then the last 30 minutes will be about installing the plan, installing the strategy. And so after this initial 90-minute call, all that you need from me is ongoing monthly briefings on your spouse. Every month I deliver you what she's going through, what she's feeling, what does she want, your leverage point list. All you have to do is just follow that, and you will find the accuracy is superb. Not once has a person come back to me saying that anything on that leverage list or anything on the core script or anything on the Harmony calendar didn't resonate with the spouse or it didn't come true. It's absolutely amazing how accurate this system is. If you want proof, you can just head over to my website, where I've listed dozens of cases of my clients where you can see it working, right? This is what you get in Spouse Intel. You get to install sovereignty, you get to install control and certainty in your marriage in just 90 minutes. And then the month after that, like after 30 days, I supply you with the next month, that is upcoming month. You just spend 10 minutes reading through the briefing, and you'll instantly know what your wife wants, what she's going through, what she's thinking. It's basically just making a mental note of everything that I say in that month, in that report. It's a very short report. It's not going to take much of your time, but the results that it gets you will be massive. Okay? This is why I say that Spouse Intel delivers clarity that no therapist can ever deliver. All right? My work is not therapy. It is not healing. It's not communication coaching. My work is precision. It is intelligence. It is operating map of a person, of your spouse, turned into a system that you can navigate with absolute ease. And not just once, but every month. Because once you have her map, you can never unsee it. All right? And your marriage becomes predictable, finally. Okay? And it's completely up to you if you want regular updates. If you want monthly updates from me, you can opt for that. If you would just like to know her emotional architecture once and for all and see how she operates, you can also get that. Gaining access to these options is what transitions you from a reactive participant to a strategic architect. This transition becomes complete with the spouse intel. You no longer have to rely on guesswork or walk on eggshells. That'll be completely gone, completely evaporated from your life. I can promise you that. Okay? So, in 90 minutes, I install the system in your marriage, and then the control is yours, completed. Right now, I've opened a few client spots. So, if you want control and command and clarity in your marriage and certainty in your marriage, you can apply below. There's a button there which will take you to the application. Now, I review all of these applications myself personally, and I only accept clients that I can deliver precision to. All right. If you apply below and we're a good fit, you'll hear from me. If you're not a good fit, then also you'll hear from me. Note that this is not a public offering, and I generally do not have client spots open for long. I close the spots very quickly because I can only work with a handful of people at a time. So I only want to work with 100 men globally, and that's the limit that I'll ever touch. This is not a public offering, it's a precision intervention for men who require architectural command. All right. So if we're aligned, we proceed with the audit, we proceed with the spouse intel for your spouse. And if we are not aligned, then I'll tell you up front. All right. Either way, I believe clarity is control, but the execution begins with your decision to apply.